Hello, I am Dr. M. Mahalingam from Faculty of Law at SGT University, Gurugram. I am going to present on Indian Constitution and status of women. Let's look at the introduction. Women as a social category have been witnessing discrimination, deprivation, intimidation, oppression and repression because our society is gendered, socially constructed, male and female distinctiveness resulting in existence of patriarchy. Our social, economic, cultural and political institutions of our society are gendered. They are perpetuating the subordination and oppression of women since time immemorial. In spite of decisive role of women in productive and reproductive activities of society, they have been undermined due to the presence of patriarchy heralding in gender bias and subsequent gender inequality. Women are frequently oppressed, grouped within each unit of social economic stratification of our society. Even though contemporary Indian society has undergone the broad process of socio-economic transformation, modernization and economic development, urbanization and globalization, of course, gender imbalances are still persist in all realms of life. Paradoxically, on one hand, Indian women have proved their potentials given opportunities in the various fields. On the other hand, they have been facing various disabilities because of pervasiveness of patriarchy in every aspects of life. Given this reality, the framers of the Indian Constitution have provided an alternative institutional mechanism by creating special constitutional provisions for ensuring gender equality as well as for establishing gender justice. Based on constitutional mandates, the various legal measures were initiated by the Indian government since independence for the empowerment of women on par with men. These enacted legal measures have protected women from the clutches of patriarchy to some extent. However, women are not homogeneous category as diverse group drawn from different religions, caste, creed and classes as well as from spatial differences like urban and rural. Patriarchy still governs the lives of women, though no longer what it used to be before, given the constitutional provisions, mechanisms and legal safeguards. Let's look at genesis of gender inequality. Gender means the social, cultural and psychological construction of maleness and femaleness through social interaction. The production of gender distinctiveness of male and female is caused by patriarchy in human society. The term patriarchy can be defined as male domination, male prejudice over women and male power. Cathay Millett affirms that the idea of patriarchy, a system in which male dominates female, was the cause for gender inequality. Under patriarchy, men and women are not equal. Men are considered as superior and are denying power and autonomy to women. The intimidation and repression of women emerged with the idea of patriarchy. Cathay Millett identifies the following factors for prevalence of patriarchy in human society. 1. Biological. 2. Ideological. 3. Sociological. 4. Relationship between class and subordination. 5. Educational factors. 6. Myth and religion. 7. Psychological and physical force. It's an ideology or a belief system which legitimizes the superior or dominant nature of men over women. The formation of patriarchal ideology was due to the process of socialization of male as aggressive being and female as passive being. Besides, religion is used by men to perpetuate the ideology of patriarchy. Men do distort religion to serve their own interests, to help justify or legitimate the oppression of women. Though all religions stress on equality between men and women, women are always subordinated to men in practice. Sexuality of women is also regarded for the second class status of women in different religions. Menstruation and childbirth is considered as polluting, and women are forbidden neither to enter nor to touch the sacred objects during the menstrual period. All the major social, economic, cultural and political institutions in human society, that is family, religion, law, judiciary, education, economy, politics, knowledge, media, etc. are gendered and patriarchal in nature. Patriarchy controls in the following areas of women's lives and societies. For example, women's sexuality, women's reproduction, women's productive or labor power, control of economic resources and property, and women's mobility. To trace the origin of patriarchy, it appears that there was no existence of patriarchy in human society when society was at nascent stage. According to Engels, in savage period, a sex-based division of labor existed, but women not subordinated to men. When society moved from savage to the period of barbarism, the oppression of women started due to the advancement of agriculture and changes in property or land ownership. It seems that men in early agricultural communities utilized their high status and power to take control of land, creation of religious belief systems which legitimized their domination, inheritance of property through patrilineal lines, establishment of abstract laws and systems of social control as society evolved to affirm male dominance. Gradually, as argued by Engels, male domination gained a significance when the idea of private property ownership came into being. Men seized power from women in the household. In the words of Engels, the men seized the reins of house also. The woman was degraded, enthralled, the slave of the man's lust, a mere instrument for breeding children. Stephen Kuhns and Peter Henderson argue that there was equality between the sexes in the early human societies. It was the difference between roles of men and women in the process of economic production resulting in gender inequality and low status of women. Many Marxists and social feminists analyze the issue of male domination and low status of women as a historical phenomenon by tracing it in a certain set of historical circumstances rather than from the universal aspect of human culture. Scholars like Sheila Robotham, Robert McDonough and Rachel Harrison claimed that the oppression or inferior position of women emerged under capitalism rather than patriarchy. Gender roles became more distinct with industrialization or capitalism than the pre-industrial societies. M. Z. Rosaldo further added that the division of the public and the private, that is domestic world, was the reason for subordination of women. So the existence of patriarchal system gives women a subordinate position in all walks of life in human societies around the globe. Indian women and patriarchy. Let's look at how Indian women were suppressed by Indian patriarchy. India has a long tradition of oppression and repression of women. Indian patriarchy is much more complex than the Western patriarchy because of caste-ridden nature of Indian social structure. The distinctive caste patriarchies were identified such as Brahminical patriarchy, peasant patriarchy and Dalit patriarchy. Caste rules have restricted agency of women all spheres of life. Generally, the traditional Indian social structure like family, marriage, superstitions, beliefs, customs, religion and rituals developed in due course of history which have perpetuated exploitation of women and have relegated women into a low position in society. Madhu Kishwar argues that apart from economic deprivation, but also the factors like culture, religion and custom are also causes for the subordination of Indian women. The patriarchal culture was promoted through Indian literature, language and religious texts. The variant forms of Indian patriarchy have impacted the status and position of Indian women through the different phases of history. Scholar Matson Everett have identified 5 specific factors responsible for low status of women in India, such as Hindu religion, caste system, joint family system, Islamic rule and British colonialism. The status of women in Indian society has been in transition from time to time. The early classical Hindu texts are the resources for the formation of patriarchy. Paradoxically, ancient Hindu religious classical texts portrayed the Hindu women as an embodiment of mother goddesses, that is Devi, primal energy, that is Shakti, and nature, Prakriti. At the same time, the Hindu religious hymns, epic poetry and Shastra, that is scripture and religious manual, provided several typologies of typical women as divine, heroic, maternal, saintly, victimized, fickle-minded, lustful or manipulative. Her economic activity, her social life, her marriage, birth and death, her physical movements were strictly and minutely controlled by religion. In general, the following attributes such as obedience, subservience and moral duties as ideal Hindu women were codified and institutionalized in the Hindu laws. In Hindu religion, no doubts women are active religious practitioners, but have lacked a religious authority, legitimate, textually sanctioned religious power. Throughout early Vedic period, they occupy relatively high position. Indian men and women appear to have an equal status to uphold dharma and designated as Tambati. The deterioration of status of women had begun since from later Vedic periods, that is the age of Sudras, epics and smritis. The religious code of man prescribed that a Hindu wife should respect her husband as God, even if he was a drunkard, lunatic and dumb-headed. The imposition of Varnashrama Dharma led to the deterioration of status of women to a large extent. Even though there was a respite from oppression and subordination of women during the era of Buddhism and Jainism in 6th century BC, they had continued to face many disabilities. Scholar Neera Desai pointed out that though women could reach the highest state, she is however considered inferior in status to a male bhikkhu. The Indian patriarchy became intense as the invasion of Muslim rulers started during the medieval period. The invasion of the country by the Muslims brought about further deterioration in the position of women. Restrictions on her rights and freedoms and resultant hardships were aggravated. The advent of Islam led to acculturization of new customs and cultural traits of it. The revival of sati, spread of parda system, denial of literacy, prohibition of remarriage, enforced widowhood, child marriage, dowry, female infanticide, devadasi system, that is temple prostitution and practice of polygamy made the position of Indian women worst. Followed by colonialism, scholar Neera Desai claimed that the prevailing conception of women, whether Hindu or Muslim, was basically feudal in character. During this time, at this circumstance, the nature and characteristic of Indian patriarchy was diluted through a series of legal measures to ameliorate the status of Indian women by then British government. To mention only a few, the Sati Abolition Act in 1829, the Widow Remarriage Act in 1854, the Sarda Act in 1929 and so on. Imparting education to women and the birth of various social religious reform movements like Brahma Samaj, Arya Samaj and others during 19th and 20th century have awakened the Indian women and further advocated for the equality of women and emancipation of women from the clutches of patriarchy. Various women's organizations at national level such as Bharat Sri Mahamandal in 1910, Women's India Association in 1917 by Madam Annie Besant, National Council for Women in India in 1925 by Lady Aberdeen, Lady Tata and others, and All India Women's Conference in 1927 by Margaret Cousins and others were formed to work for the redressal of various social issues of women and demanding for gender equality. subsequently, the women's movement seeking gender justice became a reality. Indian women from all walks of life actively took part in the freedom struggle too. On the rise of active participation of women in various independence movements in 20th century, the Karachi session of the Indian National Congress in 1931 issued a declaration on the fundamental rights of citizenship in India, wherein women's equality was assured. The declaration reads as follows: 1. All citizens are equal before the law, irrespective of religion, caste, creed, and sex. 2. No disability attaches to any citizen by reason of his or her religion, caste, creed, or sex in regard to public employment, office of power, or honor in the exercise of any trade or calling. 3. The franchise shall be on the basis of universal adult suffrage. 4th, women shall have the right to vote, to represent, and the right to hold public offices. Women in the Indian Constitution. In spite of public activism, women and rise of consciousness for gender equality, the persistence of Indian patriarchy in socio-economic and cultural life is one of the main reasons for the oppression and subordination of women in society. The manifestation of Indian patriarchy in private and public spheres has led to a denial of equal opportunities to women. It is imperative to break the ideology of patriarchy for the empowerment of women. The founding fathers of the Indian Constitution have decided to include special constitutional provisions for women along with the other weaker sections of society, especially in the fundamental rights and the directive principles of state policy in the Constitution of India. The following special provisions of the Indian Constitution ensures for gender justice. Fundamental rights. Part 3rd of the Constitution, consisting Article 12 to 35, are known as the heart and soul of the Indian Constitution. They are basically human rights or individual rights which are enforceable as constitutional or fundamental rights in India. They are special provisions for ensuring gender equality, as Indian women have been facing the brunt of patriarchy that perpetuates gender inequality. Article 14, equality before law. The state shall not deny any person equality before the law or the equal protection of the laws within the territory of India. Article 15 says prohibition of discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. Article 15A, the state shall not discriminate against any citizen on grounds only of religion, race, sex, place of birth, or any of them. 15B says no citizen shall on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them be subject to any disability, liability, restriction, or condition. 15C, nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any special provision for women and children. Article 16 says equality of opportunity in matters of public employment. 16A, there shall be equality of opportunity for all citizens in matters relating to employment or appointment to any office under the state. 16B, no citizen shall on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, descent, place of birth, residence, or any of them be ineligible for or discriminated against in respect of any employment or office under the state. Article 21 assures right to life with dignity, which is an important constitutional provision for gender equality. It reads as, no person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to a procedure established by law. Article 23 prohibits trafficking in human beings and selling or buying of human beings. Women are the victims of human trafficking for prostitution. This article provides legal safeguards for such victims. It states that traffic in human beings and beggar and other similar forms of forced labor are prohibited, and any contravention of this provision shall be an offence punishable in accordance with law. Second, nothing in this article shall prevent the state from imposing compulsory service for public purpose, and in imposing such service, the state shall not make any discrimination on grounds only of religion, race, caste or class or any of them. Now let's look at directive principle of state policy. Part 4th of the Indian Constitution is Directive Principles of State Policy, containing Articles 36 to 51 that direct the state to provide social welfare for its citizens. Though it is not enforceable by any court of law, it is considered essential in the governance of the country. Article 39A D or E specifically directs the state to frame policy for ensuring welfare of its citizens, including women. It directs the state that A. that the citizen men and women equally have the right to an adequate means of livelihood. D. that there is equal pay for equal work for both men and women. E. that the health and strength of workers, men and women, and the tender age of children are not abused, and that citizens are not forced by economic necessity to enter a vocations unsuited to their age or strength. Article 42 of the Constitution has a very important provision for the welfare of women. It directs the state to make provisions for just and humane conditions of work and for maternity relief. It deals that the state shall make provision for securing just and humane conditions of work and for maternity relief. Article 44 directs the state to provide citizens a uniform civil code applicable throughout the territory of India. Even though the state has not yet made any efforts to introduce a uniform civil code in India, its implementation will ensure uniformity of laws for all communities. It states that the state shall endeavour to secure for the citizens a uniform civil code throughout the territory of India. Now let's look at fundamental duties. Parts 4th A, which consists of only one article 15(1)A, was inserted to the Constitution by the 42nd Amendment in 1976. This article provides a code of 11 fundamental duties for the citizen of India. Article 15(1)A E is related to women. It states that to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people of India, transcending religious, linguistic and regional or sectional diversities, to renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of women. Apart from special provisions for women in the sections of fundamental rights, directive principles of state policy and fundamental duties of the Constitution, Article 326 assures right to vote on the basis of adult suffrage for its citizens, including women. It was amended in 1988 by 61st Amendment Act to substitute the word 18 years of age instead of 21. It reads as, the elections to the House of the People and to the Legislative Assembly of every state shall be on the basis of adult suffrage. That is to say, every person who is a citizen of India and who is not less than 18 years of age on such date as may be fixed in that behalf by or under any law made by the appropriate legislature and is not otherwise disqualified under this Constitution or any law made by the appropriate legislature on the ground of non-residence, unsoundness of mind, crime or corrupt or illegal practice shall be entitled to be registered as a voter at any such election. Let's look at Indian Constitution and political empowerment of Indian women. As discussed above, even though women en masse participated in the freedom struggle, they were generally less represented in politics. While the Constitution of India was prepared by the Constituent Assembly, even it had only 7 women members at the initial stage. It went down further at the final stage. In post-independence India, the representation of women is far below given their demographic strength or proportion. It resulted in demanding for reservation of 33% seats in the Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabhas. In order to ensure political participation of women in local self-governance, the Indian government amended the Article 243 by bringing in 73rd and 74th amendments to the Indian Constitution to provide reservation of seats in Gram Panchayat and Nagar Palikas. The amendments have assured the representation of women in the various statutory local bodies of self-government. The provisions of 73rd Amendment Act assures reservation for women in Gram Panchayats. Some features of Article 243D reads as follows. Not less than one-third including the number of seats reserved for women belonging to the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes of the total number of seats to be filled by direct election in every panchayat shall be reserved for women, and such seats may be allotted by rotations to different constituencies in a panchayat, provided that the number of offices of chairpersons reserved for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in the panchayats at each level in any state shall bear as nearly as may be the proportion to the total number of such offices in the panchayats at each level as the population of the scheduled caste in the state or of the scheduled tribes in the state bears to the total population of the state, provided further that not less than one-third of the total number of offices of chairpersons in the panchayats at each level shall be reserved for women. The 74th Amendment in 1993 dealt with political representation of Indian women Nagar Palikas. Some features of Article 243T states that not less than one-third including the number of seats reserved for women belonging to the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes of the total number of seats to be filled by direct election in every municipality shall be reserved for women, and such seats may be allotted by rotation to different constituencies in a municipality. The offices of chairpersons in the municipalities shall be reserved for the scheduled caste, the scheduled tribes and women in such manner as the legislature of a state may by law provide. The 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments have led to political empowerment of women at grassroots level. On account of less political representation of women in the parliament and state legislatures, the Indian women's movement and like-minded political parties or persons have been demanding for 33% reservation for women in the parliament and state legislatures. The Women Reservation Bill to amend the Article 330A has a checkered history, as it was deferred or lapsed for several times from 1996, 1998 and 1999 because of the dissolution of respective Lok Sabhas. Though it was introduced in 1996 for the first time, it was renamed as Women's Reservation Bill or the Constitution 108th Amendment Bill 2008 after its revision based upon several recommendations given by various committees proposed to amend the constitution to reserve 33% of all seats for women in the lower house of the parliament in all the state legislatures. The bill stated that the seats would be reserved in rotation being determined by draw of lots, and the seat reservation would be provided once in 3 consecutive general elections. The revised Women Reservation Bill 2008 was passed in Rajya Sabha in 2010, but it was not introduced in Lok Sabha till now because of lack of political will, as some political parties were not satisfied with some provisions of the bill. If the bill becomes reality, it is a great milestone in realizing gender equality in the realm of political sphere. Let's look at conclusion. After independence, we have the phase of legal reform, progressive pro-legislative initiatives which translated constitutional commitments and guarantees into laws to help improve women's legal status. Based upon the constitutional mandates, the Indian government enacted various legal measures for empowerment and protection of women from oppression. To name a few acts like Equal Remuneration Act, Factories Act, Maternity Benefit Act, the Dowry Prohibition Act, Immoral Trafficking in Women and Girls Act, and so on, have led to an equal treatment of women. The Committee on the Status of Women, formed in 1975, came out with a report titled Towards Equality. The formulation of the National Perspective Plan for Women's Development 1988-2000 highlighted several measures to be initiated to implement the constitutional mandates meant for women in the Indian Constitution. The various statutory bodies like National Commission for Women by an Act of Parliament in 1990 and other institutional mechanisms were created to protect the rights and interests of women. The Government of India has declared 2001 as Women's Empowerment Year, as changing nature of society demands for new legislations by passing appropriate laws and evolving an effective machinery to implement or application of those laws in relations to women empowerment. In spite of all these bold initiatives and legal safeguards, according to the Sustainable Development Goals, Gender Index has been developed by UK-based Equal Measures 2030. India has been ranked 95th position out of 129 countries in 2019 by looking at aspects such as poverty, health, education, literacy, political representation and equality at the workplace. Further, as per data of National Crime Records Bureau, crimes against women have recorded a whopping 83% increase from 2007 to 2016. It reflects the poor implementation of available legal provisions, ineffective mechanisms, and need for strengthening of institutional mechanisms for ensuring gender equality in our society. Thank you. I hope you all have learnt about the gender equality through Indian Constitution.